All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gabreski, and I'll be your host for today. Thanks for joining us on our final day of live September lessons. It's been a crazy start to the school year, and things aren't going to slow down. We have a ton of live events coming your way for October, including our space exploration events, where we'll be connecting with astronauts and researchers and engineers from NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, and other cool organizations. So get a jump on that. You can find those on our website at exploringbytheseat.com. We still have one more event after this one to wrap up September. At 2 o'clock, we'll be going live with Alex, who is going to take us behind the scenes of his climb of Everest, where he did a VR 360 film, The Quest, where he climbed Everest, filmed it in 360. It's a really cool documentary, and you'll get a chance to ask him some questions as well. So we'll be doing that at 2 o'clock Eastern. Well, what we're going to get up to now is one of my favorite things to do, and I think it's one of our students' favorite things to do, is to connect out in the field. And we're connecting today with the Around the Americas expedition. We've connected with them several times on this epic 14-month voyage, which launched in May. They're going to circumnavigate North and South America on a 48-foot sailboat, One Ocean. Their mission focuses on scientific research, education, and community outreach to raise awareness about ocean health. So this was done back in 2009, 2010, and now using that baseline info that was collected, they're comparing the changes in the ocean over the past 15 years. And today we're going to talk more specifically about climate change and sea level rise. So I'm going to reach backstage and pull in the team. Here we go. Between, I believe, Newfoundland and Quebec right now. How's everyone doing?
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Thank you very much for having us on. That was a great introduction. And yes, we are on the south end of Newfoundland right now. We are headed to Nova Scotia, and we have some rough waves. So I hope we don't make anybody motion sick because we're bouncing around.
We're moving here.
I do see things moving up and down a little bit, but that's pretty cool. That just brings, it brings a little, makes us feel like we're out there with you and experiencing those waves.
Yeah, and I think we have Grace here. She's back home in Victoria going through some research data for us. Hi, Grace.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today.
Grace, your room isn't moving at all, so you must be stable.
I'm on land right now, but I am the lead researcher for the expedition. So,
all right. Very, very cool. Awesome. Well, I know we've got lots to dig into today. So I've got tons of stuff to share on my screen. I'm going to bring it up as you call for it. But yeah, let's get into it.
Well, should we start with the buoy we dropped? Buoy 168 we dropped at our last classroom with you. And if you want to click into the link, we can just do a quick check because Buoy 168 did some amazing stuff. If you can see on that top graph, we've had almost hurricane-like weather up where we're at, and it reached a wave height of 18 feet.
Wow.
5-point-something meters. I can't read that here, but it was pretty dramatic. So that's been really fun to watch. And I believe that data should still be going up and going for the next few weeks if people want to watch it and research it.
Yeah, so if you go back in time, up on the website, exploringbytheseat.com, you can find some of the past events. This is the second buoy we've deployed, the other one being off the coast of Alaska. So you can track some of that data, things like temperature. So as we're looking there,
That
we can see
position out there. Yep.
it's going down. Temperature of the water is going down. Very, very cool.
Yeah, and we have a really good YouTube channel with Jacob Davies, and he talked about what we're seeing here with that data. So you can find that on our YouTube site, One Island, One Ocean as well, and you'll be able to find out all that information that's going on. But anyway, we just wanted to do a quick update on that, and then we can carry on with our climate change and sea level rise lesson today. And we have, by the way, I'm Jennifer Dalton. This is Tess Shornack, Mark Schrader, and you met Grace Dalton. And Mike Beamer is here. He's just steering the boat for us today.
All right, the presentation should come up now. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So next page there, Joe. And if you want to click into Northwest Passage, that will take you right into our website, and that will be our path through the Northwest Passage. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is just some of our reflections of what we saw while we were up going through the Arctic. We went from one side of the Arctic to the other side, and that was through the Northwest Passage. So if you pull that up, it's the top end of Canada, the very tippy top of Canada from one side to another.
Yeah, there you go.
We left Washington State in May, and then we came through the other side in September, near the mid-September.
About 7,000 miles to do that transit. In a passage that didn't used to be open and now is, and lots of changes, and we're going to highlight some of those.
So Mark here sailed that back in 2009 and 10, and as we transited across the Arctic, we definitely looked into different changes that we saw, from erosion to permafrost, frost to all kinds of different things, because the people on the forefront up there are experiencing climate change 4 times faster than the rest of the world. So we can go to the next slide if you want. I think there's a video on that, and that just is going to show you. Do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Sure. So transiting the passage, there are lots of challenges. And by the way, if you see any of this ice out our window right now, we're in trouble because we think we left all of that ice behind. This is single year, maybe multi-year ice that is drifting in the passage. In order to go through this ice, you have to really make a circuitous route. You got to find open leads. But this is all about when you see less ice, the water is warming up, and that leads to all kinds of other problems. But the ice is still there. It's just moving around a lot.
Yeah, you can continue with the presentation, Joe.
There it is.
Yeah, there you go. We happen to have a cruise ship up there in the Northwest Passage, and a friend that happened to be on that just by coincidence. But you can see how we're trying to navigate through some of the ice, and then over Captain Mark's shoulder, you can see the ice right beside us. But that was a big.
And some days you may be able to make 10 miles, and some days you might be able to make 50 or 60. Can't go at night because of the ice, and you have to find your way through, and we'll show you a radar shot coming up in a little bit.
Yeah, you can continue on there. So this is a comparative ice chart.
Right. So when we were through in 2009, 10, there was a little bit more ice, but not much. This is showing you the ice limit, I think, from 1981 to 2000, the extreme edge of the ice. When we went through this time, it's the white part. So you can see there's lots of blue between land up in the north and that big ice sheet. It used to be solid. So in
that yellow line, I believe, was 1981.
81. Yeah, that's the ice comparison, 1981 to present, and that's the median extension of the ice. So it is shrinking. Doesn't mean it's all going away. There's bigger ice coming down from the north, clogs the passages. So it's a challenge. All of that ice is moving around. This year was one of the least amount of ice for the past 15.
Right. But just having at least amount, it still was a big trouble trying to navigate through there, because the ice is breaking off in chunks and clogging the passages and making the Northwest Passage very unpredictable.
Right.
So you can go ahead.
Yeah, and this is some of the ice data that we get on board. Red ice, that's solid ice. Even icebreakers can't get through there. You're looking for the green and blue areas. and those are ice flows. They're ice with leads. So we pretty much came all along shore, very, very close to shore. We had to wait for that chunk of red that was in our way.
The red and orange,
And
yeah.
wind moved it offshore. Wind and current moved it offshore a little bit for us, so we made it through. The boats behind us had big trouble. The boats that, were coming the other way all got stopped there.
Yeah, it's quite a deal. So as you can see, that's our radar.
Yeah, that's the radar image.
Those are ice. That's ice all over. So we had to pick leads to get through that without getting trapped. And then the other big hazard now that's happening in the Northwest Passage is wind, and it's extreme what's happening up there. It's not just subtle wind. This is like big, huge, strong winds blowing through because of the lack of ice. Ice caused friction at one point, and it would slow any kind of windstorms. Now it's just clear passages, and it's just blowing through and causing more havoc on the towns. And because of erosion that's happening from these big, huge storms rolling through constantly, almost on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, there's now wind erosion of the land as well as water erosion of the land. So two big problems.
And then coming out the other side, another cause for the, I think Dr. Cameron Lee will talk a little bit about icebergs, and these are coming from Greenland, and they are freshwater icebergs, and they're breaking off and coming down on the East Coast side. Massive amounts of them that we had to navigate around as well.
So we're making a distinction. There's sea ice that's made up of frozen seawater. When that melts, it's not contributing to the water in the ocean. It's there. These icebergs from Greenland, these are freshwater bergs. So when they melt, they contribute to sea level rise in a big way.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit. Tessin, are you up for this, Tess? Everybody's feeling a little bit rough today from so much movement, but we're going to talk a little bit about what we saw from 2009 expedition to the 2025. And Mark had witnessed the 2009, and Tess here is going to talk a little bit about what she witnessed as well. And starting when we started right off in Nome.
Okay, I can start. So I think the Northwest Passage truly started in Nome. So we did a west to east transit, and Nome was the first place that we encountered a lot of the difficulties that we continued to encounter as we continued our journey east through the Northwest Passage. For example, Nome was the first place that we saw people we had rocks on barges out there that were being sent further north to help people build breakwaters, and those breakwaters help protect the lands from things like these big waves coming in from the increase of wind that's eroding the lands. So Nome was the first place we saw that. We also waited out in Nome for 2 weeks because the ice wasn't melted. So we were there for quite a while waiting out ice, and as we continued through the passage, we continuously had to wait out ice as we went.
And so, Mark, what did you see on Nome? It was just a little rougher, right?
Yeah, Nome is rougher. Nome's had a difficult time. They've had a couple of very large storms, and so their waterfront was decimated too. They're rebuilding buildings in the front, and that was from the sea level rise and from the wind. And then there are these barges full of giant rocks that they're shipping north to try and save some shoreline, save some little towns.
Okay, go ahead, Joe.
I can.
Teller.
This is in Teller. Teller's having to move their whole community. It's a small community, but it's been there a long time. The locals came down to talk to us a little bit about what was going on. And the first thing they said was, we're moving our town 100 feet higher because the water is up now and the shoreline is melted away, and they have to move everything.
So you can go to the next slide.
This is Ukvayek. This is the waterfront where most of those big rocks that we saw in Nome are going. They're trying to rebuild there now. They're trying to not rebuild, but put a breakwater in. Massive amounts of, you'll see on a later slide, I think that there's one breakwater that's cost $55 million at this point. In the next, here you see an excavator and people working. sandbags and rocks and all kinds of things to save the front of the town.
Was it like that in 2009?
15 years ago, people were concerned about it because there were a couple of places that looked like it might be a problem. But there was a good wide beach area there. It wasn't nearly like this. A lot has happened.
Yeah, so Grace and I had the opportunity to speak to a local when we arrived at shore, and he told us a little bit about his experience with the erosion that's happening and with the work that's being done on the land right there. And in Utqiagvik, there was another road that was previously there where water exists now and where this machinery is trying to protect the land and build these breakwaters once again. But yeah, there was previously a lot more land. There was more roads there. Now there's only one road. And this guy named Clarence, he was telling us how previously in years the storms in the fall just continue to eat away the shoreline, and there's been a lot of flooding as well. So it was pretty significant to see that there was houses right on the edge of where this erosion is taking place, and he's concerned about how long those houses are going to be able to be there. So speaking with him and seeing the erosion that was occurring in Utqiagvik was very significant.
Okay, next one, Joe.
Little town, little place, Herschel Island, where you see the sand spit that's coming out, and you see, I think that's our boat right in the middle of it. That all used to be land. We hiked ashore 15 years ago. There's a little community. You can go on to the next slide. The community now that was away from the water is now at the water's edge, literally. They have jacked up the houses. They're going to have to move those.
You can go to the
And
next
it's a
slide.
historic place. There's a boardwalk. And this has been sacred sort of hunting grounds and native grounds for a long time. And it's melting away. Early whalers that came up here in the early 1900s. There's a cemetery. It's now been moved twice.
Yeah.
Okay, next
Herschel
slide.
was also, yeah, it was very significant. I was able to talk to the park ranger there, and he's also had just been mentioning how the sea level is rising and they're having to dig out pathways to get the water out of their land. But there's a lot of scientific research being done there, so there's a lot of efforts that they're trying to do
And-
research and prevent things
And this is
from.
And Grace is
eating
going to
up
talk
their
a
land.
little bit about permafrost that we saw there.
Hi, so yeah, when we were in the Arctic, we saw lots of evidence of permafrost. So permafrost is soil that stays frozen all year round and is found across the Arctic in places like Alaska, Canada, Russia, and Greenland. And it stores a huge amount of old plant matter and animal matter, and that never fully decompose, which means it holds a lot of carbon. Because of climate change, the Arctic is warming quickly, and permafrost is starting to thaw. When it thaws, it releases greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane, which makes climate change worse. The thawing of permafrost is also very harmful to the people living in the Arctic because it causes the ground to sink and crack, damaging houses, roads, pipelines, and it's just making it very hard for the community to live safely. So it's an extreme threat that they are facing every day, and it's just occurring more and more rapidly due to climate change.
Thanks, Joe. You can see on the background some permafrost melt there. You can go to the next slide. We just have some examples in the next slide. You can see the whole side sloughing off. You can continue flipping through. In Tuktoyaktuk, we also have like another town here. As you can see, they're right on the water there. They're going to have to move the town as well eventually. And
and that's their $54 million breakwater that's in there, and they're going to have to increase it.
yeah, so.
Go ahead.
Again, if you flip forward, this is McKinley Bay here. We also have discovered, if you go to the next slide, how much this sandbar, the sand dune, actually, because of erosion and permafrost melt, it's exposing an old oil.
Machinery dump site.
Yeah.
So they had a well there and some other staging equipment, and when they got done with it, they dismantled some of it, buried it under the sand, and thought it was there forever. Well, it's now there it is. It's a monument to a waste heap.
All right, the next slide. And just some great examples. Do you want to talk? Tess took these beautiful pictures. Well, not beautiful, but really, truly impactful pictures of permafrost melt.
Yeah, kind of as Grace was just describing permafrost melt, I think that this is just a great example of it. This island was very barren, but the entire sides of it, on all sides, were being just eaten by erosion, by the waves coming in, but also the permafrost is melting, and we got to watch that with our own eyes. Like, we saw it dripping and mud sloughing off the sides of these islands. So really seeing that firsthand was pretty significant. And yeah, there was, if you can see here, I don't know if it's kind of hard to tell, but the grass and the land that's on the top of the island is now all down by the water, and it was super muddy down there too. So we were stepping in like up to our knees in mud.
Yeah.
Because of the permafrost melt.
Okay, next slide. And go ahead, Grace.
So for our expedition, we are researching giant and bull kelp, and we're studying the distribution and health and threats facing these kelps. And the reason why it's important to learn this is because kelp actually absorbs CO2 from the atmosphere through photosynthesis to fuel its growth. And this is important because climate change, a big indicator of it is CO2 in the atmosphere. So it's important to learn about things that are carbon sinks, and that is what kelp is. So what it does is, through a natural process called carbon fixation, it removes CO2 from the surrounding water it's growing in, and that lowers the local CO2 levels and helps buffer ocean acidification. In this way, kelp forests are a blue carbon sink, with the carbon potentially being stored long-term on the seafloor or sequestered in marine sediments. So this diagram is showing bits of kelp will float off and break away, and then they sink and they can be stored deep into the ocean for long-term storage, securing the carbon away. So this is very important because obviously climate change is a serious thing, and kelp forests help to lower the CO2 levels within its local area. And then here's an example of bull kelp, and it's just showing how the blades are doing photosynthesis, and that's how the CO2 is being absorbed through and being able to sequester the carbon away. So that's one thing that we are studying on our expedition is giant and bull kelp, and they're very important ecosystems, not only for this, but also for lots of different animals and invertebrates, and they're very important ecosystems for the ocean. They're considered the rainforests of the ocean. So it's a very important thing that we study them and that we help them and that we do everything we can to restore and protect them.
Thank you. And now we have Dr. Cameron Lee from Kent State University, who's here to talk a little bit about, hi, Dr. Cameron Lee, and nice to see you, and thank you for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? You guys look like you're having some rough seas back there, I've noticed.
Yeah.
We've had what, 5 days of gales. So this is the end of, this is what's left over. So we're just bouncing around in it.
Yeah,
hopefully coming out of it. I saw there's a couple tropical storms out in the Atlantic right now, so I'm sure you guys are keeping an eye on those too.
You keep that down to where you are, please.
Yeah, that would be a good idea for you guys, I'm sure. So I this is my first time here, and thank you for having me on. I'm assuming that I just kind of roll through the slides here, or is this more of a kind of an interactive thing with the people?
Yeah, no, go right ahead. We'll have questions after you're done.
Oh, okay. Well then, yeah, thanks for having me on. So as they introduced me, I'm Cameron Lee. I am from Kent State University. My research is in climate science. A lot of applied climate science, which is kind of asking the question, how does weather and climate impact something? Often my something that I look at is human health, but I've also started switching to research examining how the atmosphere interacts and impacts a lot of ocean variables. And so day-to-day sea level variability, sea level rise, these things are obviously highly impacted by meteorology on a day-to-day scale and climatology on a much longer scale. And so what I'm doing here today is to talk a little bit about how climate change is going to impact sea level rise, and so rising tides in a warmer world. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'll just kind of start off with a very kind of fundamental question with, what is a greenhouse gas? I teach a course on climate change every semester at Kent State University, and we kind of start out with these very basics, these concepts that I think everybody's heard about, but can at very least use a refresher on. But we get into kind of a little bit more detail than I think a lot of people are ready for. So a greenhouse gas has two really important characteristics to it. First and foremost, a greenhouse gas needs to be transparent to incoming solar radiation, which is the sun's light. And so you can see in this image that those beams of yellow light coming down through the atmosphere make their way, by and large, about half of it at least, down to the surface of the Earth. The Earth then absorbs that incoming solar radiation, as it's called. It heats up and then it radiates heat upwards. And this is where greenhouse gases really take on their major role, which is they absorb heat. So they're transparent to incoming sunlight, but they absorb heat, much like a greenhouse roof would do. It lets sunlight in, but it doesn't let the heat back out. And so if you want to go forward one click, there we go. Why are they important? Well, by and large, greenhouse gases are what keeps our planet habitable. They are extremely important for us to have in certain quantities in our planetary system. But if we start getting too many of them, then they will start to kind of do what they do, only at a much greater rate than they are currently doing. Some of the major greenhouse gases you can see up here. I'm realizing now you guys can't see my mouse, but some of the major greenhouse gases that you'll see up here, thank you, are carbon dioxide, which is that first one that's being circled right now. The second one over is water vapor. The third one over is methane, and the top one there is nitrous oxide, also known as laughing gas. Water vapor, it might be a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, but water vapor is actually the most abundant of greenhouse gases. It doesn't get a lot of attention when we talk about climate change because we're not adding a bunch of water vapor to our atmosphere. It's these other three greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, that are the three kind of primary greenhouse gases that we really care about. If these greenhouse gases weren't in our atmosphere, our temperature would be some 60 degrees Fahrenheit colder on average around the planet. So it's extremely important that we have these greenhouse gases in their background quantities. All right, we'll go to the next slide. So what is changing about our climate? The reason that our climate is changing is largely that first bullet point up there, which is, do people add greenhouse gases to the air? And yes, as a matter of fact, you can see on the graphic that I have at the bottom of the screen, if you look at carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide over the last 2,000 years, they were actually pretty steady for almost 1,800, 1,900 years or so. We were right around 280 parts per million is the units that are used for carbon dioxide. And then all of a sudden something happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s where you can see a big jump upwards, not only in carbon dioxide, but in methane as well. And so this is essentially adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, and it is people that are doing it. The event that happened is known as the Industrial Revolution, and this marked a major shift in kind of the economy of the entire planet, where we, in large part, shifted from a lot of manual labor, where people were doing a lot of the hard work and a lot of creating of products, etc., and farming and mining, etc., to machines doing a lot of that work instead. And we see kind of the invention of a lot of machine-based manufacturing, a lot of machine-based farming, and just generally machines. And like I tell my class, well, with people you can feed them a sandwich, you can feed them a hamburger, and they have energy to do stuff. Machines, you can't feed them a hamburger, you can't feed them a sandwich. You have to give them something else for energy, and that energy has historically, for the last 150 years or so, come from various fossil fuels. Fossil fuels being being coal, natural gas, and oil or gasoline that goes into our cars. These fossil fuels have a large amount of carbon in them, and so when we burn them, the byproduct of burning those things for energy for these machines is the release of carbon dioxide, methane, and a variety of other gases such as nitrous oxide that start building up in our atmosphere. Much like they do in their natural state, they absorb heat, and if you add more to the atmosphere, then they're going to absorb more heat as well. And so if you click one click forward, you'll notice here that along with our rise in carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, we see a corresponding rise in our temperature over the last 2,000 years as well. Think about all of the history of the world of the last 2,000 years and how much civilization has advanced in the last 2,000 years, and how much of the planet we have colonized, and pretty much all of, most of recorded history, at least, has all happened in the last 2,000 years or so. And it is within about a quarter to a half degrees worth of kind of variability in terms of our temperature, which all of society has kind of evolved into what we know and love today. And then all of a sudden, after 1880, you see this massive rise upwards, well outside the range of anything that we've experienced for the last 2,000 years, and actually anything that we've experienced for the last several 100,000 years while humans have been on this planet. And so that's what really gives us a lot of alarm when we talk about climate change, is we're changing kind of this extremely fundamental aspect of our atmosphere, something as basic as heat, energy, and temperature of the atmosphere. And that leads to a cascade of other impacts. One of which, if we move forward, is going to be sea level rise. So the sea level rises for two major reasons. The first reason, if we click the slide one forward, is that we have melting glaciers. Essentially, when we warm the air in certain parts of the world, that's going to lead to permanently frozen water starting to melt more often than it ever did before. Eventually, this meltwater will make its way back to the ocean. We talked a little bit about it with some of the icebergs that are chunking off the Greenland ice sheet and floating into the Atlantic Ocean. We have some of that same stuff also happening in the Southern Ocean, and icebergs coming off of the Antarctic ice sheet. Those are the two major ice sheets on the planet. And they are responsible for some 99% of total ice on planet Earth. But when these glaciers that are currently stored on land begin to melt, and that meltwater returns to the ocean, this causes sea levels to rise. And that's kind of half the equation. The other half of the equation, if you move it forward, is that our oceans are on average getting warmer. You can see this graphic that I have up here that shows the amount of heat energy contained in the ocean over the last, looks like 70 years or so. It has gone up tremendously. The units of measure there, you don't need to concern yourself with. They're called zettajoules. Essentially, it's a lot of heat energy that's being stored in the ocean. In fact, the estimates are that about 90% of the warming that has happened in our Earth system is actually contained in the ocean. And the atmospheric global warming that we're experiencing is only about 10% of the total amount of increased heat energy that is now in our entire Earth system. But when this ocean water heats up, like anything, if you heat it up, it has a tendency to expand and take up more space. And so this is the other half of the equation in terms of why sea levels are rising. Part of it's because we're adding more water to it, and part of it is because we are expanding the volume of the ocean due to the temperature rise of the ocean itself. I have a little picture here of a boat sending out a buoy. This isn't the boat that you guys are on, but another boat sending out these buoys. These are called Argo floats, and these Argo floats are really unique in the fact that they are able to dive down in some ways, or in some cases, I think these Argo floats are diving down like a mile below the surface of the ocean. And they gather all kinds of different data. One variable is ocean temperature. We can see it's not just the surface of the ocean, but a variety of depths in the ocean that are all beginning to heat up and take in a lot of that heat energy. Thankfully, it's not up in the atmosphere, but that's not great, obviously, for ocean life either. All right, we'll go up to the next slide here. And so kind of looking to the future, there is a lot of research that is done examining how much sea levels will rise. We have currently experienced a few inches of sea level rise, up to about a foot. However, the estimates are that we could see upwards of 5 feet by the time we get to the year 2100. 5 feet of sea level rise, it doesn't sound like a whole lot. Again, if you're living in Ohio, where I am, it's 1,000 roughly feet above sea level. But if you are one of the communities around the Arctic, or if you're one of the communities across the world that is very close to the coastline, 5 feet is actually a tremendous amount of potential sea level rise. If you go one slide or one dot forward there, I would argue that sea level rise is probably the most important impact of climate change. And the reason that I would argue this is because it is probably the one that's going to impact the most amount of people. If you kind of think about all the different potential impacts of climate change that you hear about, a lot of them are variable in that, you might get more rain here, but you might get less rain here. You might get a lot warmer temperatures here, but you might get temperatures that don't rise as much here. You might get a variety of different things in different locations. However, sea level rise is one of those things that is going to be everywhere. Everybody is going to be impacted by it. Even countries that might not have much of a coastline, some of those countries are probably going to be inundated with people that have to migrate out of the danger zone of where sea levels are rising. And so this is going to be one of those impacts that is going to have wide-reaching effects. I have this question down here: will sea level rise be the same amount everywhere? It will rise everywhere, but it's actually interesting. There's a few different factors that have to be taken into consideration to determine how much the sea level is going to rise. One of those things is whether or not the land is rising at the same time that the sea level is. If the land and the sea are both rising at the same time, then you might not get any net sea level rise. However, if land is subsiding while the sea level rises, then you might get more than you would expect. But also, it depends on the baseline temperature of the ocean. If you warm the ocean a degree Celsius from 1 degree to 2 degrees, you'll get a little bit of sea level rise. But if you warm it 1 degree Celsius from 25 Celsius to 26 Celsius, you'll get about 3 times as much expansion of the ocean in those warmer waters. And so generally tropical areas are expected to experience greater amounts of sea level rise than we would expect in other parts of the globe. All right, next slide. or next dot, yes. One image that I wanted to share with you, this is a rendering from Climate Central. Climate Central is a entity that tries to kind of straddle science and journalism to communicate the impacts of climate change. And this is a rendering of what New York City would look like, with what looks like 8 feet of sea level rise. I'll note that 8 feet of sea level rise is definitely on the high end of sea level rise projections, but it is not entirely out of the question. So next. So yeah, if this slide will just run forward on its own here. The very first part is what Charleston looks like now. This is Charleston with 1, 2, and now 3 feet of sea level rise. And it'll go up to 4 and 5 feet of sea level rise. Charleston is a major city, and it's a beautiful city if you guys have never been there before. And it is also a very low-lying city, as is much of the eastern coast of the United States. And because of this, it has a very kind of gentle or gradual slope into the ocean. And so any small amount of sea level rise from 1 to 2 to 5 feet in this particular case will allow seawater to inundate much farther inland than you would expect along a coastline that has a much more steep gradient into the coast. And so Charleston, along with a lot of eastern United States cities along the coast, are particularly vulnerable because of how gradual their coastline is going into the Atlantic Ocean. Next slide. So yeah, talking a little bit about how sea level rise will kind of impact people. This is another reason why it's one of the biggest impacts in the entire globe. And it's because 50% of the world population lives in what I call the coastal zone. That's about 8 billion people that live on Earth, and so about 4 billion people that live in this coastal zone. Now, I'm not necessarily saying 4 billion people are going to be directly impacted with their houses going underwater, but what I am saying is that there are many people, close to 1 billion, somewhere between a half to a full billion people that will. In addition, there are another 3 billion people that live close enough to the coastline that they rely upon the resources and the amenities that are within striking distance of sea level rise along the coastline. And so you might live far enough inland that maybe your house doesn't flood due to sea level rise. But you count on the fact that there are a bunch of stores, there is a power plant, there's a manufacturing in this city that will be potentially flooded. And so when I say 50% of the world population lives in that coastal zone, that means that about 50% of the world population is going to be negatively impacted by climate change, either directly flooding their house or being reliant upon something that will flood. So 1 meter in sea level rise will be enough to cause plenty of problems for some people. If we are to look at kind of the best guess of what sea level rise will be in the future, it is somewhere around 1 to 1.5 meters. I will state with a caveat, however, that our understanding of glacial melt dynamics, that is to say how glaciers respond and how fast they melt, is improving to the point that we think that that's probably a low estimate, 1 meter, and that sea levels will actually probably rise a little bit faster than that kind of low end projection of 1 meter. I'll also add that, this is a background rise in sea level, and so you have to add other stuff on top of that, right? You have 1 meter in sea level rise, and now you have an extra meter's worth of high tides, and you have an extra meter's worth of storm surge, and you have an extra meter's worth now of waves crashing upon upon that higher sea level. And so because of all of these things, and because it only takes one storm to flood things and completely destroy a city, this has, again, a really high potential of impacting a lot of people and doing a lot of damage. This graphic that I have down here at the bottom of the screen shows high tide flooding. This is the incidence with which places along the eastern coast of the United States are experiencing flooding just due to high tide. The picture that I have at the top kind of shows a particular event where you can see it's sunny out. There wasn't a storm. This wasn't an inundation of rain, but it was just a particularly high tide. These people built these houses far enough back, way back when, that they thought that it was never going to be flooded. But now with that extra foot or so of sea level rise, high tides are coming that much further inland that it is causing substantial flooding to roadways and to houses along not just the eastern coast of the United States, but a variety of locations around the globe. And you can see the east coast of the US sometimes is getting up to 500 of those events a year and climbing rapidly. For this final slide, I just want to reiterate the fact, I'm not sure, where everybody in our audience is from, but I think we, as, I'm from the United States, I just am naturally going to have a bit of a US kind of centric view on climate change. And I think we often look at impacts of climate change as something that's going to impact elsewhere, that's going to impact other people first before it impacts us. And this just really isn't the case. And so I want to just stress here that coastal impacts due to sea level rise are going to impact everybody, and the U.S. will not be excluded from this. This graphic here is showing that some 5 million people's houses will be impacted by even a meter's worth of sea level rise in the United States alone. And again, the U.S. is considered a fairly wealthy country, right? Think about what's going to happen to people in underdeveloped countries that cannot afford to relocate further inland, or they live in a small island country where there is no inland. Globally, again, these numbers could be upwards of 500 million people that will be directly underwater due to the sea level rise. You might think that if you're not living near the coast, this won't impact you. But human beings don't just quietly succumb to natural hazards that imperil themselves or their families' lives. They will fight for life. They will try to get out of the way of these rising tides. And it's up to us as a global community to make sure that they are accommodated. And so this is, another major impact of climate change is how do we, as a global society, make sure that our fellow citizens of the world are taken care of when they are impacted by these hazards that climate change will bring. That's all I have. I'm open to any questions that you guys might have, and thanks again for the time.
Great information, Dr. Lee. What great information. Thank you. Let's see. Let's turn it back and see about the questions.
All right. Well, we've had a great crew tuning in with us today, so we will get into some of that Q&A action now. So this is a grade 4 class right now. They're wondering, those breakwaters that you saw, the huge amounts of money being put into them, how much time is that actually going to buy these Arctic towns?
Oh, gosh, I think that's really a question for Dr. Lee. I don't know. It looks to us like with the melt and the erosion might buy them 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, it would depend. I couldn't really see how tall they were. But yeah, it depends largely on, what their time horizon is and planning for this, right? If they're planning for another 15 years, then they might only need to build it up, another foot or so. But if they're planning for the long term and want to stay in that area for a while, then it would be wise to build it up a few feet so that, they don't have to adapt, retroactively as opposed to proactively.
Right.
Yeah. And so this question kind of follows up on that. Like Nome, for instance, some of those other projects we saw are big, they're expensive. So people are wondering, are they being funded by local governments? Is this federal? Where does the funding come from for these big projects, these big breakwater projects?
I think it's a combination. I think mostly it's federal money that's protecting the communities. Some communities, for Teller, for instance, it didn't look like they were getting much of a subsidy at all in order to move. They were getting some incentive to move because there just wasn't enough money to go anywhere. So I think it's a combination.
Yeah.
And I'll also add that this gets into kind of a whole nother impact of climate change, right? The economic side and the funding side. Who's going to pay for these things, right? Often for a lot of the adaptation things, it is more local that is kind of helped with some federal and state funds. But breakwater and seawalls, they generally are kind of temporary in terms of how long they work, but that water is going to go somewhere. And so eventually the people that build the seawalls, who have enough money to build the seawalls in the first place, they might be protected by it. But that water is going to go to the areas that can't afford a seawall, the areas that are probably already a little bit more vulnerable to climate change. And so this is kind of another cultural and socioeconomic side of climate change. It's important to think about as well.
Yeah, good point. And there are a lot of island communities we're not even talking about here that just don't have the means. I mean, they have to find a different island. Go ahead.
Okay, so Nova Scotia, we got a few questions from our crew here in Nova Scotia. And so they saw some of the charts showing, global temperature thousands of years ago. And they're wondering how we know what temperature was like 1,000, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually just taught this last week in my climate change class. We have things that are known as proxy records. And these proxy records are things such as tree rings that you can essentially look at things that are impacted by climate, like trees, right? Some trees are particularly vulnerable to temperature. Some are particularly vulnerable to precipitation. And they will grow more when the temperature is great. They will grow less when the temperature isn't perfect for them, right? And so you get samples of trees from a variety of different locations. Some of these trees live for hundreds to thousands of years, and you can see how much they grew in a particular year, because every year they will kind of have a new ring added to them. And then you can, based upon the ideal temperature for that species, you can see what the temperature was like for those years. We also have records like ice cores, where you dig a giant core about yay big, miles through ice sheets, and you can look at what temperatures and the atmosphere and dust and volcanoes and a variety of different historical events were like for the past 100,000 years. And so, yes, we've only had thermometers for a couple hundred years, but we do have a lot of these records called proxy records that kind of encapsulate what the climate was like for thousands and thousands of years ago.
All right. And that follow-up question they have is, temperatures are going to rise in the ocean. What kind of impacts could rising temperatures have on sea life?
Great.
Yeah, go ahead. Did you want to take that one?
Grace, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so ocean warming is a big issue. It's affecting kind of everything in the ocean right now. A lot of different species all around the globe rely on certain temperatures, and that's how they live. And so, for example, it's affecting lots of things like the lower levels of the food chain. It's affecting where they are in the ocean, how popular they are. And that also affects then throughout the food chain. So, for example, a lot of humpback whales here off of the Pacific in the Northwest are starting to move more further north, and they're starting to be seen in the Arctic because krill are starting to move further north, and humpback whales eat krill. And so that is because of warming waters. So you're really going to see a lot of change in migration. You're going to see some die off of things that can't handle these warmer waters and temperatures. And so there's going to be a lot of change in migration, some good, some bad, but it will be evolving for sure throughout time.
Great answer.
All right. Here's a question for our team on the boat. When will you touch land next?
Well, we're hoping by Thursday morning to be in Guysborough, Nova Scotia. That's what we're hoping for. We've got some storms we're sort of weaving around, but we believe we can get there by Thursday.
In between. So we're going along now. At what's our speed over there? I can't see.
Hopping 4.5 to 5
We're
knots.
sailing wind power here. We're going a little under 5 knots. Wind should increase through the day. So that looks like a good ETA for Guysborough.
All right. Kelp is an important ecosystem that you're examining as you go through around the massive island that is North and South America.
Yeah.
In the Northwest Passage, are those waters too cold for kelp, or were there any kelp forests?
So usually those waters are too cold for kelp, except our crew did have the chance to find some kelp, especially when they would pull the anchor, which is what holds a boat down on the seafloor. And they would pull the anchor up, and they pulled up some species of kelp. It wasn't exactly the kelp that we're studying. It looked to be sugar kelp from what I could see through photos, but they did find some kelp up there, which is pretty rare, pretty exciting. So that was some new discoveries.
Okay, and maybe one more question here for Dr. Lee. Changes are happening right now. We can see them happening. We see it in the data. Can we slow it down? Is there a certain amount that's going to happen no matter what we do? What can we do?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in short, yes to both of those. There is a certain amount of what we call kind of warming in the pipeline, a certain amount of warming that it's going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it now, just due to the fact that carbon dioxide that we've put up there is going to stay up there for a while and continue to warm. But we can always stop putting carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide and these greenhouse gases into the atmosphere to prevent even more climate change and warming from happening. And so if there is anything that we can do, it is, as a global society, get off of our reliance on fossil fuels. The great news is that we know what's wrong. We know how to fix it, and we now have the technology and the ability to actually fix the problems. We couldn't say that necessarily 20, 30 years ago when we kind of first discovered the issue. The technology was still kind of advancing. But now we have the ability. We're just not doing everything that we need to do. So as an individual, as a family, just trying to save energy, be energy efficient in any way that you can. I have solar panels on my house. I have an electric car. I do what I can to, not put all that stuff in the air.
Okay. Well, before we wrap up for today, I want to share a couple links with those tuning in. You can visit oneislandoneocean.com if you want to follow along on the latest adventures. You've got the map there, as well as what I love about the map is photos and videos from all along the journey. So you can follow that journey through the Northwest Passage and keep track with those new adventures. And then if you want to join our next live classroom event, if you visit exploringbytheseat.com, under the events, you can find One Island, One Ocean. And our next one together is coming up on October 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern. We're going to focus on bull and giant kelp and why their health matters. So don't miss that on October 6th. I have a feeling that Grace will have a thing or two to say about that. Dr. Lee, thank you so much for being with us today. Grace joining us from land, and of course the Around the Americas crew who's out off the coast of Newfoundland right now. Thanks for being with us for another great session.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for everybody for joining us. We look forward to coming to Nova Scotia. So thank you again, Joe, for giving me the platform to share.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, thanks everyone. We're going to
Thanks,
sign
guys.
off for today.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you in October.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.